Hi, welcome to my channel. I have a new story for you today.
My daughter-in-law moved into my house to save money. 3 years later, she acted like she owned every room in it. She moved my things, ordered me around, and laughed at my late husband's old estate like it was worthless. I didn't argue. I just sold that worthless land for $90 million. The coffee maker wasn't in its usual spot when I walked into the kitchen that rainy Tuesday morning. Instead, a massive matte black juicer dominated the counter. My reliable little drip machine had been mindlessly shoved into the far corner by the sink. It was a tiny change, but it perfectly summed up the last 3 years. Ever since my son Leo and his wife Chloe moved in with me, supposedly to save up for a down payment, I'd been slowly pushed to the margins of my own home. Chloe hardly spoke to me unless she needed someone to sign for a package or let a repairman in. I didn't sigh that morning. I didn't cry about the lack of respect. I simply unplugged the expensive juicer, neatly coiled the cord, and tucked it away on the bottom shelf of the pantry. Then I put my coffee maker back exactly where it had sat for 15 years. When Chloe swanned into the kitchen an hour later, draped in an expensive silk robe, she looked visibly annoyed. As she hunted for her new gadget, she looked at me, eyebrows arched, ready for a confrontation. I just sat at my small table by the window, sipping my coffee, and calmly leafing through the morning paper. I didn't explain myself. I just waited to see if she actually had the nerve to scold me in my own house. She pressed her lips together, marched to the pantry in silence, grabbed the juicer, and carried it up to her room. She understood that this space was mine, even if she refused to say it. But as I finished my coffee, I knew this was just the beginning. Chloe would find other ways to let me know that in her eyes. I was just a piece of lingering furniture. I folded the paper and decided that from today on, I'd be watching very closely. The next power play didn't take long. It happened during the weekly grocery run. Up until then, I'd always kept the fridge stocked. I bought high-quality meats, fresh produce from the local market, and made sure Chloe's expensive almond milk never ran out. But that Friday afternoon, I found a note on the kitchen island. It was a shopping list written in Chloe's elegant cursive. It was nothing but high-end specialty items: trefoil oil, organic lactose-free cheeses, and imported berries. No, please. No, thank you. Just a list. As if I were her personal shopper, I took the note, folded it neatly, and dropped it in the trash can under the sink. Then I put on my coat and drove into town. I bought exactly what I needed for myself for the next few days: a small piece of salmon, fresh bread, some veggies, and my favorite jam. On the way back, I stopped at an appliance store and bought a compact but roomy refrigerator. I had the delivery guys carry it straight into my private study on the first floor. That evening, when Chloe and Leo got home, I heard them clattering around the kitchen cabinets. A few minutes later, Leo was standing in the doorway of my study. He looked awkward, as he always did when he was caught between his wife and his mother. "Mom, did you forget the groceries? The big fridge is almost empty." I looked up from my book, closed it slowly, and met his eyes. "No, Leo. I did my shopping. My food is in here." I pointed to the new fridge humming quietly in the corner. "From now on, please handle your own meals. You're both adults with solid careers." Leo blinked, stunned. He wanted to argue, but he didn't have a leg to stand on. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't even blamed him. I had simply drawn a very clear, practical line. He nodded slowly and shuffled back to the kitchen, where I could hear Chloe's muffled, angry voice. I smiled to myself and opened my book. 3 weeks later, Chloe's sense of entitlement escalated in a way that was almost funny. It was a Saturday morning when she casually mentioned in the hallway, "My parents and sister are coming over for dinner tonight. We'll eat around. Tea ling ling. A light roast would be nice. Nothing too heavy." She didn't even stop to hear my answer. She just assumed the old lady in the house would handle the prep and set the table, and then make herself scarce. I didn't feel angry, only a deep, cold sense of clarity. I went to my room, packed a small overnight bag, and called an old friend who lived just outside the city. Around 2:00 p.m. While Chloe was in the shower and Leo was out back raking leaves, I grabbed my bag and headed for the door. I ran into Leo on the way out. "I'm staying at Margaret's for the weekend," I said calmly. "The guest room heater is off. So, if you need it, make sure to turn it on early." Leo leaned on his rake. "Wait. What Chloe said we were all having a roast tonight." I looked him right in the eye. "Chloe told me what she wanted to eat this morning. I never told her I was cooking. You have a perfectly functional kitchen. Have fun with your guests." I got in my car and drove off without looking in the rearview mirror. I heard, later, from Margaret, who had talked to a neighbor, that they had to scramble to order delivery that night. The expensive cars of Chloe's family were parked in the driveway, while the delivery guy rang the doorbell with stacks of pizza boxes. When I returned Sunday night, the atmosphere was ice cold. Chloe ignored me completely, her eyes glued to her phone. It was a quiet but total defeat for her. She had learned that my labor wasn't a free subscription, she could just toggle on and off. The chilly vibes lasted well, into late autumn. One evening, we were actually all sitting in the living room together. Leo was watching a documentary while Chloe scrolled through real estate apps on her tablet. She said loudly, "Housing prices are a joke. We're going to be stuck in this old crate forever if this keeps up." She didn't look at me when she said it. Then she turned to Leo. "What's the deal with that rundown estate your mom inherited? That old farm out in the hills. It's probably not even worth the dirt it sits on. Just a worthless pile of rocks in the middle of nowhere. Why doesn't she just sell it so we can finally have a down payment for a modern house?" Leo shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. "Clue. That's Mom's call. That land has been in Dad's family forever." I sat in my armchair knitting a scarf, letting the needles click softly. I didn't defend the property. I didn't explain to Chloe that nowhere had recently become the site of a massive new tech corridor, and that investors had been fighting over neighboring lots for months. I didn't say a word about her insults. Instead, I thought about the discreet meeting I had scheduled in the city the next morning. 2 representatives from a major international development firm had reached out to me. They needed that specific piece of land for a new luxury residential and commercial park. Chloe thought I was just a clueless widow clinging to nostalgic ruins. She had no idea I had already been reviewing the first drafts of the contracts. If it's so worthless, the hassle of selling it is barely worth the effort. "Right," I finally said in a soft, indifferent voice without looking up. Chloe snorted dismissively and went back to her tablet. I kept knitting, stitch by stitch. The absolute silence inside me felt like a well-kept secret about to explode. As winter approached, the days got shorter, and Chloe's mood got noticeably worse. Since they were now paying for their own groceries, their fun money for weekend trips was drying up. One evening, Leo knocked on my study door. He looked stressed, running a hand through his hair as he sat down. "Mom," he started hesitantly. "Chloe and I have a bit of a situation. The car needs new winter tires and a major tune-up. It's totally blowing our budget this month. Could you maybe help us out with about $1,000? I put my pen down and folded my hands on the desk. A year ago, I would have grabbed my checkbook without a second thought, but the days of unconditional support were over. "Leo," I said calmly, You don't pay rent here. And you don't pay for utilities. You're saving a significant amount every month. I have my own budget to manage for my retirement and the house's upkeep. I won't be giving you that money. Leo stared at me as if I were speaking a foreign language. But, Mom, it's just $1,000. Chloe says you barely have any expenses anyway. You just sit here most of the time. The disrespect, the fact that he'd subconsciously adopted Chloe's vocabulary. Stung. But I didn't let it show. I stood up, opened a drawer, and pulled out the latest electric and water bills. I slid them across the table. These are the operating costs for this house, which have doubled since you two moved in. I cover them because you're my son and daughter-in-law. But there will be no more cash handouts. Learn to live within your means. I opened the door. Good night. Leo. He took the bills. Face pale. And left without another word. The next morning, I watched Chloe angrily walk to the bus stop in the cold because her car was still in the shop. It wasn't long before Chloe tried a new way to assert dominance. In mid-November, she decided she needed a proper home office. Instead of using the small guest room, she set her sights on my sunlit reading room on the second floor. When I came back from a walk one Tuesday afternoon, my favorite wingback chairs and my small bookshelf were sitting in the hallway. Chloe was in the room with a tape measure, talking loudly on the phone with a furniture store. I stood quietly in this doorway until she noticed me. She lowered the phone slightly. Oh. Good. You're back. I'm setting up my office here. You can move your stuff down to that little room by the laundry. It's mostly empty anyway. She was about to keep talking, but I just turned around without a word. You didn't argue. I called 2 strong college kids from down the street, who often helped me with the lawn. An hour later, under Chloe's speechless gaze, they carried my furniture back into the room exactly where it belonged. Then I asked them to carefully carry Chloe's desk supplies down to the basement room by the laundry. Chloe was shaking with rage in the hallway. What do you think you're doing? I need this space for work. I looked her right in the eye. My voice steady. I own this house. Chloe. Every room. Every closet. And every key. You are a guest here. If the accommodations I provide aren't enough for you, you are more than welcome to rent your own apartment. I closed the door to my reading room, turned the key in the lock, and put it in my pocket. From that day on, I locked all my private rooms whenever I left them. The message was clear. Her control in this house was dead. And in the background, the sale of the estate was moving forward. December brought the first snow and a strange fake sense of peace. Chloe tried to regain control in a subtler way. She took over the Christmas planning. She wanted to host a huge, perfect dinner to show off to her family and some of Leo's friends. For weeks, she dominated the kitchen, ordered expensive decorations, and dictated the seating chart. She didn't consult me on a single thing. 3 days before Christmas Eve, I was in the kitchen making tea when she approached me. She looked busy, almost condescendingly friendly. Listen. There are going to be a lot of people here for Christmas Eve. We've reserved the big table in the dining room. I've put you at the very end near the kitchen door. That way it's easier for you if you want to head to bed early. All the noise can be a lot at your age. It was a petty move to sideline me while basically telling me when to disappear. I stirred my tea slowly and looked at her. I knew that the next morning, the final bank confirmation would arrive showing the $90 million in my account. The closing documents had been signed weeks ago. My new life was ready. That's perfectly fine. Chloe, I said with a gentleness that visibly surprised her. I'll sit right there. Don't you worry about me. She smiled, self-importantly convinced she had finally put her quiet mother-in-law in her place. Over the next few nights, I quietly packed my most important documents, my jewelry, and a few keepsakes into 2 small suitcases, which I stashed in my trunk. I was ready for the moment the game ended. Not with a bang, but with the cold weight of reality. Christmas Eve went exactly according to Chloe's script. The dining room was glowing with her new designer candles. The roast was served and expensive wine was flowing. Chloe's parents sat at the head of the table. Leo looked nervous and eager to please, and I sat silently at my assigned spot near the kitchen door. Nearly invisible. The conversation was all about careers, luxury vacations, and Chloe's latest wins at work. My daughter-in-law, riding high on the attention, ignored me entirely until dessert. As the panna cotta was served, the room quieted down. Chloe leaned back, looked at me from across the long table, and said, with a pitying smile, "So, Helen, how's your quiet little life? Did you ever find a buyer for that old ruin in the hills? That place nobody wants?" All eyes turned to me. I calmly wiped my mouth with my linen napkin and laid it neatly beside my plate. I looked her right in the eye, my face totally serene. "Yes. Actually," I said quietly, "I sold the property." Chloe let out a sharp, condescending laugh. "That worthless old box for what? 10,000. 000. Hopefully. It's enough for a new heater for this place." I folded my hands on the table, let the silence hang for a second, and answered in a clear, firm voice, "No. For 90 million. Her smile vanished instantly. The clinking of dessert spoons stopped. Chloe's father nearly choked on his wine. Leo stared at me like I just lost my mind. "I'm sorry." What? Chloe stammered, her voice suddenly shrill and unsteady. "You're joking." "No," I replied matter-of-factly. "The land was bought by a consortium building a new tech campus. The contract is signed, and the money cleared my account yesterday." I watched the color drain from Chloe's face as the hard reality settled over the table. The power dynamic had shifted forever in less than 5 seconds. The rest of the Christmas dinner felt like a quiet funeral. Chloe's family left unusually early, clearly overwhelmed by the news. Chloe herself tried to act friendly, suddenly stammering about our future together, and offering me more wine. I politely declined, said my good nights, and went to my room. Early Christmas morning. Chloe and Leo were already at the kitchen table when I walked in wearing my coat and carrying my purse. They both jumped up at once. Chloe had a soft, almost pleading smile on her face. "Helen." "Good morning." I made fresh coffee. "We really need to talk about last night. This changes everything. We could renovate this place, or maybe look for something bigger together." I laid my coat over a chair and stood by the table. I pulled a slim white folder from my bag and slid it toward Leo. "What's this?" he asked tentatively. "That, Leo, is the new lease agreement for this house," I explained calmly. "I've decided I no longer want to spend my retirement in an environment where I'm not respected. I'm moving out today. I still own the house. But as of January 1st, you will be paying market rate rent to my property management company. You will also cover all utilities." Chloe gasped. "You can't do that. We can't afford the rent on a house this big. Then you'll have to find a smaller apartment," I replied without a hint of emotion. "You both have good salaries. It's time you learn to stand on your own 2 feet. My support ends here." I took my car keys from the hook, put on my coat, and walked to the door. No arguments. No accusation. Just clear, final action. As I let the front door click shut behind me, I felt lighter than I had in years. It was a crisp, sunny January morning. I was sitting on the large cedar deck of my new home, an elegant modern bungalow, right on a quiet lake in the mountains. My coffee was steaming, and aside from the distant call of a bird, it was silent. No slamming doors, no condescending comments, no uninvited guests, just peace. Over the last few weeks, Leo had tried to call me several times. He sounded desperate. They had realized that the upkeep and rent for my old house far exceeded their budget. Chloe had tried sending emotional texts on WhatsApp about how we're family. I didn't block them, but I kept my replies short, professional, and polite. I told them they had 3 months' notice if they wanted to move out according to the law. The management company handled the rest. I didn't need a relationship built on financial dependence or fake regret. With the money from the sale, I set up a few charitable foundations and built the exact life I'd always wanted. I travel when I feel like it and read for hours without interruption. I knew Leo would eventually have to find his own way, away from Chloe's constant control. But that wasn't my job anymore. I had drawn my boundaries late, but I'd driven them so deep into the ground that no one could ever ignore them again. I took a sip of my coffee, leaned back into the soft cushions of my chair, and watched the sunlight sparkle on the water. For the first time since my husband died, my life belonged entirely to me. It was a quiet ending with no drama. Just a deep, unshakable sense of satisfaction,